Okay, so live on the internet. Here we go. Can't make any bloopers. Ready? So we can do a short reflection on the Dhamma. Can you see me okay? Yeah? Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. So nice to see everybody here today on Tuesday again, and doing our first live Facebook broadcast. So we'll see. I think actually most of the friends I have on Facebook, they're in Sri Lanka, so this might be the middle of the night for them. But I think you can kind of share it and do all these other things, so see how it works out. And yeah, so this upcoming weekend is our first retreat. And this is actually the first kind of public retreat that I've personally ever conducted. Did one once before at a kind of a friend's apartment in Toronto here. It was actually 2016 when I got back. I went to pilgrimage on the Buddhist holy sites, and then came back here for the Rains retreat. And my friend, he was actually becoming a monk, and he actually became a monk this past Saturday. And he was staying in Scarborough, and he had an apartment, and so he was away, and he let me stay there. So I was kind of camped out in this apartment in Scarborough, kind of walking on the parks with the dog walkers and people wondering what I was doing. And asked him, can we hold a retreat? And so he said, sure. And so sent out an email to some friends and checked to see if they wanted to come. And so they came, and we did this retreat. And at that time, actually, wasn't doing any Dhamma talks at that time. So there was actually a monk from Thailand who one of my friends knew, and he Skyped in and did a Q&A. And so that was quite a kind of nice thing. And these kind of retreats, they're very nice kind of things to do. I remember when I first started to meditate when I was about 18 or so. I would come to this, there was a Zen temple in Toronto, and I used to go there kind of every Sunday. I was kind of, I guess you could say, I was kind of very faithful in going there. And used to notice that when I went there on the Sunday, that kind of, my whole week would be different, compared to if I went or I didn't go. It's kind of, so it was like totally obvious to me, and I never missed it. And then they would also have a kind of, or rarely missed it, they would also have a kind of sitting on Wednesdays, which is kind of similar to what we do here, what Bhante does in Mississauga. And I think it's going on a lot of places now, but they were actually one of the first ones in Toronto to do it, kind of have this kind of regular weekly meditation that people could go to. And that one was a bit longer. I think it was like 6:30 till, it used to go to 9. And you would sit for like a half hour, then there'd be a break, and then like another half hour and a break. And so it was like a mini retreat in itself. And I used to notice that going to these kind of mini retreats, again, like it would, totally boost my week, like in the middle of the week, the rest of the week, I would be feeling much different than if I didn't go. And then usually quarterly, they would have these other retreats, kind of, they would have one on Thanksgiving, they would have a 5-day one at Christmas, they would have a 5-day one in the middle of the summer, and they'd have a 3-day one in the spring at Easter. So there'd be kind of these 4 retreats. And going to this retreat for the first time, had no kind of clue about what I was getting myself into. Just like, okay, I like to meditate. I'll give this kind of a retreat a try. And still remember the very first one that I went to in the summer. At that time, I was barely able to sit cross-legged. It's in the West, we often kind of sit on these chairs. Your whole life you're sitting on a chair. So, after you've finished elementary school, that's it for sitting kind of on the ground. And so I still have kind of photos of myself, and my knees are like kind of way up in the air like this, kind of trying to sit on the ground. And so I figured, I'll go for this retreat and see how it goes. And at the same time, I was thinking to myself, well, I hope this doesn't get too easy. Hope it's, not too kind of boring. But I had no idea, like, what I was getting myself into, which was probably a good thing. So this is actually this kind of 5-day retreat in the summer. And each day there would be 9 hours of meditation. And I determined that I wouldn't sit on a chair. And also decided to sit, before coming to meditation, I used to like martial arts, take Taekwondo. And there you always start with your off leg, like your worst leg is the one you start learning to kick with first, so that you get good at kicking with this leg. And so, you might have noticed when you meditate, you have this kind of on leg and an off leg. They have a meditation friendly leg, a meditation unfriendly leg. And so going to this retreat, I thought, well, I'm going to, take this Taekwondo example and sit with my meditation unfriendly leg, which I don't know if was a good idea or not. But I was thinking when I went in there, I hope this isn't kind of too boring. And holy, I had no idea what I was getting into, because I remember just being on this retreat, and you're sitting there and it's the same place, the same people, but your mind is just going all over the place. Kind of going here and there, bouncing up and down. And these retreats were totally silent. So they would signal changes in the retreat by this kind of a bell, or by this kind of what they called a moktak, which is this kind of wooden fish. So when you woke up in the morning, people would go around chanting with this kind of moktak, this wooden fish, and that's how you woke up. So you'd wake up at 5, and the first sitting was at 5:30, and then you'd be doing that for the whole day. And so I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm going to kind of try to cheat. I've had enough kind of sitting. I'll just kind of fall asleep. And so did this the very first, it worked for one sitting, I think, for like a half hour. I was like kind of falling asleep. But then after that, you couldn't sleep. Absolutely no way you could fall asleep after that, after doing that once. And then I remember being in this pain that was just so excruciating. I felt like I'd kind of, gone to hell. I remember sitting there and meditating, and I was like, this is what it feels like being in hell. It's terrible. I can't take it, and just having these thoughts like, this is too much. I've had enough, This is good enough, after the first day, it was like, this is good enough, this is about enough for me, this is as much as I should do. It's like, and why am I here anyway? I'm just sitting through all this terrible pain, and you kind of develop all these stories about people on the retreat too, even though you've never talked to them, you can't talk at all. You're all sitting there silently, and at the same time, you're kind of instructed to look down at the ground, so you don't even look at people's faces that much. But then you kind of end up with these kind of ideas about what people on the retreat are like. Oh yeah, this guy, his personality is like this. You can kind of develop these kind of subtle grudges against people, even though you're never speaking to them. Decide you like people or dislike people, even though you have no idea who they are. It might be somebody kind of beside you, and their breathing is like a little bit loud. And all of a sudden, this is like the most terrible thing that's like ever happened. This person's breathing is too loud, and when will they stop? There's whatever kind of mind going through all these things. And at that time, I was taking a lot of martial arts and thought that, or I had been taking a lot of martial arts and thought I was like a pretty tough guy. But was on these retreats with these old ladies, you know, in their like 60s, and they seemed to be just sitting through, you know, these long periods of meditation. And I was, you know, just dying, you know, the whole retreat. I was just kind of, you know, dying, you know, and figuring like, okay, when is this going to end? And I was kind of thinking to myself, well, I thought I was tough. These people, you know, they're really tough. You know, these kind of people, they're kind of sitting silently with no troubles at all, no problems at all. And here I am kind of shifting around. But the interesting thing about being on these kind of silent retreats, we kind of came home very strongly, was a lot of the things, a lot of the thoughts that go on in one's mind get kind of amplified, you know. Kind of a thought of hatred, kind of even acting on a small thought of hatred, the effects of that get carried through. You know, and right at your next sitting, you feel it. Kind of this, you know, even if you kind of glared at somebody, you're kind of feeling like, oh, I don't like this, you know. That thought is kind of amplified and it plays over. There's no escape from it, you know. Normally when a thought of hatred comes up, then, you know, if a person acts on it, they can go and distract themselves with, you know, a little bit of TV, you know, calling up a friend and complaining. But then on the retreat, when you do something even minor, it's right there waiting for you in the following sitting, you know. Same with any thoughts of kind of annoyance, you know, oh, this sitting is lasting forever, you know, kind of have these thoughts like this thing is never going to end. Following those thoughts brings absolutely no relief from them whatsoever. There's kind of no escape from a thought of annoyance by following it. Actually, the very interesting thing in being on a kind of retreat like that is having a thought of anger, having a thought of hatred or annoyance, you know, whatever kind of negative thought, grabbing onto that thought and running with it tends to increase these feelings of bodily pain. You know, kind of the whole time feel like you're struggling with this bodily pain, and these thoughts just amplify it. Kind of, where's this coming from, you know? So what it leaves you with is basically no option. The only kind of escape from whatever difficulties are going on, going on in a retreat like that lasts for 5 days. The only kind of escape from these things is to focus on one's meditation practice. And kind of, this actually becomes one's lifeline. There's no other way that a person can save themselves on a meditation retreat except through meditation, except through trying to make their mind peaceful, except trying to focus on the breath, trying to focus on figuring out the solutions to problems. And actually it was there, as going through some of these kind of retreats, that having one's back to the wall like this, not being able to kind of shift around, not being able to escape, it's sometimes at the moments when a person thinks like they can't do any more, that somehow this uncalled for reserve of energy comes up. Just think this kind of terrible thing is going to never end, and all of a sudden you get this feeling like of refreshment. You're just totally refreshed out of the blue and feel like you can go on sitting. And right there we learn quite a lot about the mind, because the whole time one's kind of sitting there, you know, feeling, oh, this isn't going to end, this isn't going to end, this isn't going to end. This is our minds talking to us. These are perceptions that our minds are having, and most of the time these kind of perceptions are things that if we act on them, they become true. This is so terrible, you know, I can't take this, and we act on that thought. We grab onto that thought, and it becomes a reality for us. No, we can't take that if we act on it. But the amazing thing about going through a kind of long retreat like this, like 4 or 5 days or whatever it is, or even just persevering in a meditation retreat, is that this kind of unexpected thing can happen where the mind just turns around and the person all of a sudden feels very clear, very at ease. I remember there was this one retreat in particular where I used to have this terrible pain in my right knee. Whenever I would sit, it just felt like really terrible. It felt like it felt like kind of, it was kind of tearing, and, all these bad things were happening, and had no clue what was going on. And I remember I was on this one 5-day retreat one time at that same temple. And I still remember it very vividly because, you eventually get used to going on these retreats and just feeling intense pain. And then there was this moment where something happened and my knee shifted. And from that time on, I never felt pain in my right knee. And that's been the case to this day. Have not felt any pain like that in my right knee. And so when these kind of experiences happen, then it gives a person a kind of confidence, kind of confidence like, wait a minute, these problems that arise, these are things that can be overcome. These aren't things that necessarily are impossible. It won't necessarily be this way forever. The pain that I'm feeling, this is what you learn going on this retreat. You feel like this physical pain is never going to end, and suddenly it ends. You feel like this terrible annoyance is only going to get worse, and suddenly it stops. How does that happen? Who knows? But what it does teach us is that a lot of the times the thoughts that a person has in their mind about what they can and can't do, about what it is and is possible not to do, and about what the future is going to be like, a lot of these times these thoughts are actually false. These thoughts about what we're going to be in the future, these thoughts about how things are going to play out, these thoughts about how much a person can kind of take, these thoughts are often just kind of lies. Actually, they're truths that we can either grab onto and make true or not. And so I remember on these retreats, the reverend who was leading the retreat, he would often start. I don't plan to start the retreat on Saturday this way. Kind of scare everybody off or anything like that. Maybe if people got used to it, you could do things like that. But he would often say to people when they first came on the retreat, he was a very kind of stern person, kind of I may be a kind of friendly person. He was very kind of stern. And he would start the retreat by saying, he would often say this, I don't know if he'd start, but he'd be like, you are capable of a lot more than you think you're capable of, And this would be the kind of message through the entire retreat. Because I think he realized that kind of teaching Canadians in Canada, kind of might get used to things coming pretty easy, Used to going and kind of pressing the button on the convenience machine and little thing turns. I don't know, they might be much more advanced now. This might date me, but the thing turns and the bag of chips comes out and you get it. You kind of go to the store and put your money down, you get that. Nowadays you go on the internet, whatever you want to find, there it is, right away. But actually some of the most kind of most profound experiences that people can have in their life, they come after a long period of putting forth effort in the face of difficulty. Kind of often don't talk about this because you don't want to scare people off, right? Kind of, people come to meditation for the first time, they're already feeling a little bit of pain. You don't want them to feel like it's going to be that way forever. But actually the true benefits that arise in a person's practice, they come often after a fight. And this is the truth of the matter. If all these kind of amazing things that the Buddha was talking about, if they just came at a snap, then everybody would have them already, right? They would already be here, But when we learn about the mind, we learn about the way that these things kind of tend to turn around. They tend to turn around like this. We think that something's never ever going to break. We think it's never ever going to end. And we keep putting forth effort to try to get that wholesome result. And the amazing thing is that the day comes when whatever that problem is, it breaks. And the amazing thing about the way these problems break is that right before they break, it can seem like the worst, most terrible, most escalating thing that's just not going to stop. It's like this kind of, it kind of comes to a head like this. And right before it breaks, it's right here at the very kind of top. And for a person who perseveres in the face of kind of difficulties like this, they get to experience the moment where the thing that they thought would never end, ends. And they get to see what's after that. They get to see what comes after that. And our Buddhist practice and our practice of meditation, this kind of thing can happen to people in both large and small ways. Yeah. Kind of the ways that we learn about on a meditation retreat is just like this, learning how much pain we can take and seeing it break. Actually, kind of, he would often also say, if people got sick, this shows you how tough these retreats are kind of like tough. And if people ever got sick, these lasted 5 days, and they were like, I can't come to the sitting because I'm sick. He would be like, bring the part of you that's not sick. And so you had to kind of come anyways, and you had to kind of sit there. Sometimes it'd be like, snot, running down, your face, and you're trying not to cough or sneeze, But in these kind of ways, when a person perseveres through these kind of things, they gain a lot of confidence, And it's helpful to have a whole group there with you. It's helpful to have a teacher spurring you on. But when this kind of knowledge comes, it's your own knowledge. It's something you've gained for yourself, because at any time on a retreat, you have the option to leave, right? I mean, nobody's going to block your door. Like they might try to convince you not to go, but the option is yours. And it's the exact same way in our life. It's the exact same way in our practice, just being in the world, Kind of a lot of the problems, a lot of the difficulties that we face, these are things that are coming from our mind. The same mind that's getting so obsessed about this guy breathing too loud to the right, so it sounds like something completely unbearable. That's the same mind that reaches out and grabs onto things in the daily world and makes them a huge problem. The same mind that thinks, I can't take one more moment, one more minute of this kind of pain. This is the same mind that tries to convince us to stop when we're doing something wholesome and it's getting difficult. Same mind that tries to convince us to turn tail and run. And the amazing thing about going on these retreats is we learn this kind of thing very clearly. If we persevere through the whole retreat, if we keep sitting through the pain, the time comes when it breaks. The time comes when the difficulties in our mind change. And this is a knowledge that we take with us then out into the world. So that when our mind starts to try to tell us again, look, this is something you can't take. This is something you can't do. It's time for you to just, go lie down on the bed and, watch 3 hours of TV, which of course is going to make which is going to make us more depressed, right? Doing something like that. That same mind is the same mind that's trying to convince us to leave the retreat. And so when a person experiences this thing where the difficulties get worse and worse and worse, and we persevere and they break, when that mind comes and tries to tell us something off of the retreat, it doesn't sound so convincing anymore. It doesn't sound so real anymore. It's like I remember when I was young, and don't know if this is, it's on the internet, but all of us here are kind of regulars. But there was this kid who used to bully me, when I was a little kid. And I wouldn't recommend people doing this as a monk, but I remember very vividly, he used to kind of always, him and his brother, and you're a little kid, you're kind of toddling along, and you're like this tall. And then if another guy is 3 years older than you, he's like this tall, like double your height. So this guy and his brother always used to come and kind of pick on me. At that time I was kind of a minority, in this school that I was in. Canada at that time was not as multicultural as now. And they used to keep picking on me and try to find me, and I'd always be scared hiding out behind the portables. And then there was this one day that kid came up to me in the lunchroom, and he actually kind of punched me, in my face, And, they were always kind of bothering me. And that particular time, I kind of punched him back, and I didn't kind of back away from this kid. I wouldn't recommend this as a monk. This is a metaphor, not saying go fight people. But the thing that happened is that after that, I figured I was going to get it from him and his brother again. But following that time, him and his brother never picked on me again. That was the very last time that they ever did anything to me. And the defilements that come up in our mind are almost like these kind of bullies. They kind of come up there really loud and strong, like, you can't do this, do what I say, Go have the bag of chips, go lie down on the couch. Go drink a beer, go do whatever. And if you refuse to do that, they get really angry, kind of get louder and louder, cause us more and more difficulty. But the day comes, we keep resisting them, keep resisting them, keep resisting them, and the day comes when finally they break. Finally, their hold over us stops. And that's when our knowledge of Buddhism, that's when our knowledge of the Buddha's teachings, you might say, it becomes a true knowledge. It becomes a knowledge that's not just in the books. It becomes a knowledge that's not just in the scriptures. This is something that we've gained for ourselves. And this is a pattern that can repeat. Not just something that happens on the meditation retreat. All of the things that occur in the Buddha's path, all of the wonderful things that we read about in the text, these are there to be realized by people who strive, by people who persevere. And the nice thing about persevering and striving in these things is that it's just like these kind of bully kids, If we back down from them, if we run away from them, the next day they're there again, waiting for us. And we live our life in fear, kind of hiding out behind the portables. Is he here? Is his brother here? Live our life in fear. Am I going to get this next thing? Am I going to... what's going to happen to me if I get sick? What's going to happen to me if, I don't get this next car, don't get this next house? What's going to happen to me if my kids start acting up, if my husband or wife leaves me? These are the bullies in our mind. But the nice thing about them is that there can be a time when we stand our ground and say, look, this unwholesome thing that you want me to do, I'm not going to do it. And they get louder and louder and louder. But if we don't back down, if we persevere, the time comes when they get knocked down. And when they do, they're never as convincing after that, really. They can be until we become a stream enter. But you can see, this is something we can see for ourselves. After that, we're free from them, more or less. We don't have to run around hiding behind the portables, kind of free from this kind of addiction. And so we can build this up in small and large ways. We can build this up through practicing meditation. We can build this through going on retreats and persevering. And we can build this, and we build this, this becomes a kind of knowledge for ourselves. This becomes where our practice becomes true. And this is where we start to learn what the Buddha means when he says, learn to become an island unto yourself, a refuge unto yourself. Learn to become somebody that these kind of floods of hatred, craving, and delusion can't overwhelm. So we can become a person like this.